Welcome to Flashpoints. I'm Jeff Pegues, joined by CBS News Senior National Security Analyst Juan Zarate. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you, Jeff.
Let's talk about this new modification to the current alert system. I know it sounds confusing, but we're going to explain. First, though, let's hear what Secretary Jay Johnson had to say about it.
We are creating an intermediate level to the NTAS system that includes an NTAS bulletin, which describes general developments or trends regarding threats of terrorism.
So this is a modification to the current alert system, which has not been alerted because of the threshold that you need to alert it. You need a specific and credible threat. So this is an intermediate level, an NTAS bulletin is what they're calling it. What do you think? Is this something that is necessary, and does it work?
Well, what the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. government has to do is to be able to convey to the public its sense of the threat. And I think the challenge all along, whether you have a color code system or a nuance system is...
Yeah, remember that color-coded system that was put into place after 9/11?
After 9/11.
And it had different levels.
Right. And the purpose of that, in any system, frankly, is to convey to the public a sense of where we are in the threat. It tends to be fairly broad and crude, right? With
does
these
it
colors.
give them any real usable information?
Right, and I think that's the challenge. And so I think what the Secretary is trying to do is to tailor it a bit more. The other purpose, Jeff, and people tend to forget this, is it's also a signaling mechanism to state and local authorities who actually have to put police on the streets, security in the train stations, etc. It signals to them a bit more granularity. They're already getting information from the federal government, but it's a way of sort of homogenizing how that information is getting out. And so it's a signal to the public and also a signal to the responders and the security personnel who have to deal with the threat.
And right now, both the public and law enforcement perhaps needs more information as we turn to this new phase that law enforcement has talked about in terms of ISIS and the threats that are faced with this onslaught of social media and how it is being used by ISIS supporters, operatives to recruit and to carry out attacks. Let's listen to what FBI Director James Comey had to say about that.
I think everybody in this room knows this, but it's worth reminding folks that your parents' Al-Qaeda was a very different model than the threat we face today. The paradigm of Al-Qaeda still exists in the world, but ISIL has become the leader in the global jihad through this use of the crowdsourcing of terrorism.
All right, so clearly this is a new phase. What we're hearing from law enforcement is this the new reality? Have the tactics really changed, or is the public, law enforcement, feeling more vulnerable?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, but you and I, Jeff, have talked about this, that the nature of the terrorist threat has shifted over time. Both the means by which terrorist groups have to inspire, to attract, to radicalize have changed. ISIS is innovating social media, exactly. You also have an environment that over time, with Al-Qaeda, then ISIS, has really shifted the strategic framework. Al-Qaeda before used to be about centralizing its attack planning, coming from the center and attacking out. Now Al-Qaeda and ISIS have declared, look, don't come and fight with us, attack in place with any means possible. Part of the jihad isn't fighting just in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria. It's also fighting where you live. And so attack fellow citizens. And that's in part why security officials are so worried. That very strategic shift has then met with new methodologies and is beginning to meet with radicalized individuals in the West. And that's the real fear.
And there were a couple of examples that the director used, Chattanooga, and making that stronger link. Really, that was the first time that Comey has made that link to inspired terrorism when it comes to Chattanooga, but also San Bernardino.
That's right. And I think what the FBI director has been talking about for some time is a full spectrum of terrorist threat. On the high end, the well-organized, well-orchestrated, deployed attacks from a central, well-organized group like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, back down to a lone wolf. But then in between, the inspired actors, the semi-coordinated actors, the maybe trained a bit actors, you know, there's a full spectrum of potential threats and vectors that authorities now have to worry about, which is in part why they are trying to provide more information, more nuance, and frankly why they're more worried.
Yeah, and we're seeing that the American public is more concerned as well with these public opinion polls, with this new phase that law enforcement is now talking about.
That's right. One thing to keep in mind, Jeff, it's hard to move down off of the threat. And so a concern that we always had in the Bush administration that no doubt the Obama administration and Jay Johnson, the DHS secretary, will have is you can move the threat up, you can nuance it, but when does the threat come down? What is that marker for the lessening of the threat? And in this environment, that's a very difficult question to answer.
All right, they put a 6-month period on this new bulletin that has been issued, so we'll see how they draw it down a little bit. For Juan Zarate, I am Jeff Pegues, and that is Flashpoints.